Finally, for Chapter 6, the first session, or Chapter 7, I'm reading 7.6, Chapter 7, the first session of which we're going to look here at two-dimensional arrays. Remember, a two-dimensional array is really just a paired array, right? We have array number 1, and every operation we do in array number 1, we're going to do similarly to array number 2. So when we had first name, last name, that would map to each one of these to an array, and that's exactly what we're going to see happening here. The difference here is how it is that we're going to load values into these. Essentially, what we're going to rely on is nested loops. So this is on page 102 for those of you following along. We'll just make this a little bigger to see. We essentially have a multi-dimensional array, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 along the tops here, and each of those is going to have a set of values that goes down these columns here. So remember that when we have a multi-dimensional array, we show them with the first value being the rows and the second value being the columns. So essentially what happens is, if we think of this as, how do our loops work? First we do the rows, then we do whatever the columns are after that. We increment our loops, and then we do whatever the columns are after that. We increment our loops to get the rows, and then we do whatever the columns are after that. So this is the way that we should conceptualize how it is that we would use arrays to populate a multi-dimensional array with data. So what is that going to look like when it comes to actually loading a two-dimensional array in pseudocode? We can use either a do loop or a do while loop. Those are going to be the easiest to work with. And finally, we'll be here on page 103 to do that. I am not going to beleaguer this to death with you. What I will tell you is this outside do while loop is going to maintain the rows for us. So we can see here, do while input values exist. So this is the not end of file, essentially. So we are looking for this loop to continue as long as we have values. And we know that less than 6, which means we've got 5, is going to be our last row of data. Here's where the textbook is a little inconsistent and it makes me a little crazy sometimes. You will notice that here we have row index set to 0, and here we have row index less than 6. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to be our rows. So this is standard industry looping. But here we have row index plus 1, so really it starts here. So this is a little unusual. We wouldn't oftentimes see this because this is inconsistent code. You're telling me to go from 0 to 5, but then to start at 1 so that we have 1 through 5. It's a little unusual. I would suggest we don't do it this way. I would suggest keeping things a little bit cleaner by not having the switch between 0 here and 1 here. But it's a small change to make. So our outside do while loop is taking care of our rows. Our inside do loop is taking care of our columns. So again, what's happening is on the, and I will call it the first loop through, so this is number 1, we set up row number, it's essentially 1, right? Because it's 0 plus 1, which is just 1. And my argument here is, why do this to the next developer in the chain? Just call it 1. But here we are. So our first outside do while loop is going to be for row number 1. Our inside do loops are going to be columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. When those are done printing, we're going to come back up to the top of our do while loop here. We're going to print row number 2, and then we're going to come back inside of our do while loop and print columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to come back up and do 3 dot dot dot, and we're going to finish with 5. So this is the code for how to populate a multi-dimensional array. Is it colossally different than what we saw with paired arrays? No, it's really very, very similar to how that works. It's just that we've got them here in a set of nested loops as opposed to reading from a file that has everything we need in there. Is it substantially unusual to see this kind of code? No, absolutely not. This is the way you're going to see it many, many times. So it's just we're using nested loops. The outside loop, that's this one, is the rows. The inside loop, that's this one, is the columns.